Broadcasting on the internet airwaves from the great state of Minnesota. My name is Shaun, and you're listening to The Shaun Tabatt Show. Today, my special guest is Jean Watson, and we're going to discuss her new album, which is called Steady My Gaze. Jean, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Shaun. It's great to be here.
Well, Jean, I had the pleasure of meeting you earlier this year when both of us were at the NRB conference in Nashville. But if this was the first time we met and I bumped into you in a coffee shop and struck up a conversation, how might you answer that inevitable question, what do you do for a living?
Oh, that's such a hard thing. And, I tend to sort of look at the person that's asking the question, and so my answer sometimes is different because it's hard to explain. I travel, I sing, I speak, I write, I record, I teach, and so it's hard to pin it down to one thing. I guess I would say that I use music and words to share the love of Christ, and that kind of puts everything together. That sums it all up. All the different things I do would fall under that title.
I think that's a perfectly good summary. So you have a new project that's going to be coming out. What date can folks expect to see that?
It's going to be officially released on October 9th, and I'm so excited to share this new music finally with the world.
For those who are familiar with your earlier music, and for the benefit of those who you are new to them, they're new to you, give us an idea of what this music on this album is going to sound like. What words might you use to describe it?
Well, it's definitely in the pop genre stylistically. It's upbeat and it's fun, and I enjoy really using a contemporary sound, but my favorite place to minister is Ireland, and so a lot of my music has a little bit of a Celtic flair to it. It has mandolins, and I play the fiddle and the violin on it, and sing with a little bit of a Celtic sound. So some people would compare me to kind of a Celtic woman type sound. And I'm also classically trained, and so every once in a while you hear a little bit of classical in there as well. So it's quite eclectic.
For the album, are there any particular tracks that really set the stage or set the tone for the album overall?
Goodness gracious. This album is kind of all over the place stylistically. We had Phil Kagi accompany me on guitar on two of the tracks, and there's a song called Overcome, which we actually recorded twice, and we did it with a full band and very upbeat, fun, praise band type sound. And then we did it again at the end of the album, just Phil playing gut string guitar and me playing piano and violin. Very special and very intimate. And I think that song really represents kind of the range of the style. It also really expresses my heart, that everything I would do or say or sing or play would come out of a heart of worship. So that song, I think, really sets the stage for the album and really reflects well what the intention of my heart was in creating this music.
Well, that's one of the things that I think is wonderful about the album is it has a little bit of something for everybody. You have such a range of styles that you're exploring in the music that I think nearly every listener is going to find something that really resounds with them and speaks to that kind of music that's just special and touches their heart.
Yeah, that's my hope. The songs just vary quite a bit, and that just reflects my personality. I love different styles of music, so I like to explore different sounds and styles, and so hopefully there's something on there that everybody could enjoy and resonate with.
And one of the things that's rather unique about your music and your ministry is in addition to having fans in the U.S., you also have a solid fan base in the U.K. You've got a daily radio show that broadcasts in Ireland. I'd love to hear a bit about how you developed an audience and fan base in the U.K., and how did this radio show come about?
Wow, well, that was a really fun story. I had just a special desire to go to Ireland and England. Even when I was a child, I was just really drawn to those cultures and those nations. I used to look at pictures and dream that I'd get to go there someday, and I didn't understand why. I even made a picture about Ireland when I was in ninth grade, and I still have that picture to this day. And then I went to music school and studied the violin classically, got married and had 4 children, and I really stopped playing music altogether for a while, just because the season in my life had changed and I needed to focus on my marriage and my family. Later in life, the family moved around quite a bit and unfortunately ended in divorce. The marriage ended in divorce several years ago, and I found myself in a place where I was suddenly having to reinvent my life or really go back to God and ask him to reinvent it for me, which was a wonderful thing. Just saying, Lord, here I am. Things didn't go the way I planned. And so how can I get my life back on track, or how can you get it on track for me? And after that, some doors began to miraculously open for me to play my violin and sing again. And the dream to go to Ireland was kind of resurrected in my heart. I began to think about that again. And as I began to record music and play, it definitely had a sort of a Celtic sound to it. It was heard in England for the first time in 2007, and I received an invitation to come and tour England. And so I did. I showed up in London dragging a 70-pound keyboard and had my violin on my back. And I just went from church to church and played and sang. I went into prisons and on street corners and coffee shops and just shared my story of God's faithfulness in my life, even when I felt like I had not been faithful to the Lord. How he was giving me an opportunity to fulfill my destiny again, even though I thought I had really screwed it up. So that tour led to another one. Years went on. I ended up going to Scotland and finally made it into Ireland about 5 years ago. And United Christian Broadcasting was kind of watching, and they saw the Irish people really connecting with this message of hope and redemption, and just God being able to use a person who feels unusable or who feels like a failure. And so they were watching this connection between me and the Irish people and asked if I would try doing a radio show. And so now I have a devotional radio show that's broadcast twice daily on United Christian Broadcasting in Ireland, and I get to record that show right here in the state of Michigan. So it's the wonders of technology allowing me to fulfill what I believe is the calling and the destiny that God had on my life from the beginning.
Well, that's so cool because God used something that was just deep in your heart, a longing and a love, and opened doors in a very strange or unique way, however you want to phrase it. It's rare that you hear of an artist here from the States developing a following overseas before they would really have a significant following here in the States. That's so much fun.
It is. And to me, the fun part is that it really doesn't make a lot of sense. It wasn't something that I sat down and planned, and we didn't have a marketing plan. We didn't have publicity. We didn't have distribution. And yet, when the Lord has a purpose for us, he fulfills it in his way and his time. It's always bigger and better than our hopes and dreams. And so anyway, I feel so blessed to feel that I'm where I'm supposed to be right now and that God is using me.
Well, I want to jump back to something you said a little bit earlier. You've obviously performed in majestic cathedrals and wonderful theaters, but you'd mentioned in prisons, and you've talked about before how you'd rather perform sometimes in prisons and in red light districts. What's appealing to you to ministering your music to those circles?
Oh, I love it. I love to go into dark places and bring the music, because many times when I go into prisons or homeless shelters, I'm speaking and singing to an audience that's quite broken, and you just don't know what people have been through, and sometimes they may not be ready to hear the word of God, but I can pick up the violin and play, and the Holy Spirit can flow through the music and use that to soften a heart and minister in ways that I don't fully understand. But it's just been such a powerful tool, and I love to watch the Lord just bring his love through the music and then also through the message to people who feel perhaps even more of what I felt, back several years ago when I really felt like I had failed God and made some mistakes and perhaps screwed up my life, and yet the Lord came in and said all he wants from us is a surrendered heart. And so I love to bring that message to prisons and homeless shelters where people need it the very most, and it's very satisfying and fulfilling for me to do that.
Well, and I remember when we met back in February, we sat down and you shared a little bit of your story, but throughout your life, you've experienced some different supernatural, what you might call God moments. Would you mind sharing a few of those with us, especially the ones that were pivotal experiences for you and your music ministry?
Absolutely. Well, as I shared earlier, there was that turning point in my life where I felt like things had come crashing down, and I was really at a low place, emotionally, financially, spiritually. And I cried out to God at that moment, and prayed to him for help. And right after that prayer, just immediately after this prayer, the phone rang, and there's a voice on the other end, and he asked if this was Gene Watson. I said, yes. He said, is this Gene Watson that plays the violin? And I said, yes. And this man told me that he'd heard someone talking about me in a restaurant the night before, and he was concertmaster of the Kalamazoo Symphony, and he was very interested in hearing me play the violin. And to me, this was completely miraculous because I didn't play very much at all, and nobody really knew that I played. And so to me, I knew that God had orchestrated this whole thing. So a short time later, I played for him, ended up getting a job playing the violin professionally again, which was a sign to me that God wasn't finished with me. And that same year at Christmas time, my landlord brought us a Christmas tree, and as he walked in the house, I had a recording of myself singing Christmas carols, playing quite by accident. It wasn't intentional. And he heard the sound of my voice, and God just really touched his heart. And he heard something, and he started to cry, and he asked me, what the recording was. I said it was me. And he said, I don't know what you're doing with your life, but that's what you're supposed to be doing. And so this man gave me my rent money back and told me to give it to a recording studio. And that was how the ministry really began, was the Lord funding it and facilitating it. Back in the beginning, the doors opened miraculously from the other side for me. As I mentioned before, I didn't push them open. These were doors that opened for me, and all I had to do was walk through. So I'm so thankful for those moments where the Lord revealed himself and just gave me hope in the future.
Well, as you look back in those special moments where God clearly moved and was opening those doors, does it help you to have confidence that you're continuing to move in the right direction?
Oh, absolutely. It was so clear to me that these things just don't normally happen. Landlords just don't turn around and say, here's your rent money, go record and recognize a calling on someone's life. You can't make that happen. And the same with the man that heard me play the violin. And it was just so reassuring to me because I really was dealing with feelings of guilt and condemnation about my life and where I'd ended up, which was not where I ever thought I'd be as a Christian woman. And so for God to begin to open these doors when I least expected it, when I felt like I deserved it the least, it was just so healing for me. And to know that he wasn't finished with me, and in fact, it was going to use the dark times that I'd gone through, the times that I struggled. He was actually going to use those times for good, because it was the struggle that I went through that prepared my heart for ministry, that brought me to that place of surrender before God, where I knew that I was absolutely nothing without him. And that's where he needed me to be so that I could really carry his authority and his love in such a powerful way. It just comes from being a broken vessel before him. And sometimes the Lord uses suffering to bring us to that place. It doesn't feel good, but it's a glorious thing when he does.
And I think for a lot of us, as we look back on our life, there are those hard times that, given the choice, we might not want to go through them again. Yet at the same time, it's some of those circumstances, those situations that God used to turn us into the person we are today. God used to prepare us for the ministry he needs to be doing right now. And, it's not easy, but even in the hard things, God can use it, God can redeem it, God can create it into something beautiful and new.
Absolutely. And I don't believe that God causes suffering. It's not his nature. The Bible says that God is love, and yet we live in a world where we're dealing with sin, and it's the effects of sin that cause pain. And so God is taking something that's already there, and when we put it in his hands, he can use everything for good. He can turn around and redeem things through Christ. And, that's the good news of the gospel, is that there's always redemption, there's always hope, and there's always a future. And I think, the world is so filled with despair and hopelessness. We see it every day. And, if we can just shine God's love and just offer some kind of hope for the future to the person in front of us, I think that's what it means to share the gospel, is just offering hope wherever we go.
I'll say amen to that. I think as we go about our day, even if we're able to show the smallest kindness to a person, open a door, share a little bit of God's love with the person who's helping us at the store, whatever it is, if we can carry the countenance of Christ with us throughout the day, we're just able to give little bits of the gospel out to everybody we meet. And we don't know where they're at on their path or where they're at on their journey, but each of those times that we sow encouragement and sow God's love into those people's lives, God uses it for the journey he has them on. So I would just say to the listeners, be encouraged, do that, and be representing Christ everywhere you go.
That's right. And then, the Lord can use whatever our gifts are and our talents to do that in a unique way. And that's what he does in my life through the music and through my speaking, but particularly through the singing and the violin playing. It becomes just a vehicle that he uses to share his love. And so that's so much fun to allow him to do that through our gifts.
Well, when we were talking a bit before we got started with the interview, I just said congratulations because I noted in the press kit that it says you recently got married to a chaplain in the U.S. Air Force. Would love to hear a bit about what it's been transitioning from being single to now being a military wife. What's life like in Michigan for you these days?
Wow. Well, we live a really unusual life. My husband is still called in the Air Force, and we love that. We love that calling. It's been fun to see how our partnership in marriage now is expanding the calling for both of us. And this is a really special man who also understands and shares my calling in ministry, and is extremely supportive. He just releases me all the time to do what God's called me to do. And I think being in the military helps him understand the concept of being able to be together while we're apart. In other words, it doesn't trouble him that there are many, many days and sometimes even weeks when we're not together, and where that might seem really strange in a normal marriage situation. In the military, they deal with separation a lot at times. And so for us, we deal with separation, but God gives us the grace to love each other, support each other, and stay connected even in the days when we're apart. And we look forward to the day when we can be together all the time. But until then, it's just been fantastic to have him, and I really have needed his covering, his support to do what I do, and hopefully offer the same kind of support right back to him as he does what he does. So it's wonderful, and I'm really enjoying being a military wife as much as I'm able to do that.
Well, and I think it's wonderful that it seems like you're continuing to move into newer stages of ministry, and God is opening more doors for you, and how wonderful that he gave you a husband to support you in some of that and to just be there to partner with you in your ministry. That's just so exciting.
Absolutely, and it really makes things easier for me, and I did it by myself for quite a few years, and God gave me the grace to do that, but two is better than one. It's easier when you have that person there to be the sounding board and the covering, the protection, and the support in all different kinds of ways. It just it makes it so much easier. And I would say that the ministry really exploded to a new level after I got married, and I just know that my husband is a huge part of everything God's doing through the music.
So as you look ahead, we're pre-recording this ahead of the release date, so as you look ahead to the rest of 2015 and into the new year, what's in store for you?
Oh, exciting things. The album Steady My Gaze is coming out on October 9th, and I'm really excited about that. Phil Keaggy's on the album. John Ellis of 363 sang on the project and did a duet with me, and that was so much fun. But we're already looking way beyond that now into the future, and I'm working on a worship project with John Ellis, which happened just spontaneously. We were in the studio working on Steady My Gaze, and, guess what? We just started singing some worship songs together, and it was so anointed and so special that we decided to record them, and it just kind of grew from there. But we just all got very exciting partnerships with different musicians coming alongside me in this worship project, which will be released probably early in 2016, and I can't wait. It's just a new direction, a little bit different sound, and again, some really exciting partnerships with some musicians whose names I can't release quite yet, but very, very exciting for me. So that's next as a worship project.
Well, Jean, if the listeners are interested in connecting with you online, finding out more about your previous music and picking up a copy of the new album, where is the best place for them to find you?
Well, my website is www.jeanwatson.com, and you can hear the music, you can read my blog, you can see pictures and videos, and connect with me through the website. I'm also very active on my Facebook page, which is Jean Watson Music, and try to post encouraging things on Facebook and Twitter. And but the website's the best place to connect, and I love to hear from people. So please visit me there and join the mailing list.
Well, and I'll make it easy on all the listeners. I'll include links to the album and Jean's social profiles and such in the show notes for this episode, so you're going to be able to find that over at ShaunTabatt.com. And it's time to bring this episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show to a close. Many thanks for being a part of my conversation today with Jean Watson, talking about her new album, Steady My Gaze. To connect with Jean, you can also follow her on Twitter, where she goes by the handle @Jean_Watson12, and that's the numbers 12, not 12 spelled out. And for more on her new album, her previous work, and just to catch up on everything Jean has going on, you should visit her website, which you'll be able to find at jeanwatson.com. Well, Jean, I just want to say thanks so much for sharing with us today. It's been a great pleasure speaking with you.
Thanks, Shaun. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And that's all for this episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion, you can connect with me via email using show@shauntabatt.com. Be sure to follow me on Twitter, where I go by the Twitter handle @STabatt. And if you enjoy the show, head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. Until next time, this is your host, Shaun Tabatt, signing off.